Welcome to the Relationship Cycle with Jorge and Nelsa. And tonight we have a sizzling hot topic. We have just finished election season here in the United States for those of you who are international listeners. And tonight's topic, Poppy, is dating and politics. What's your take?
Oh man, that is definitely a hot topic these days, and
Hmm.
it is very interesting to see the transition that we've made in the last decade or so, where before it was considered very taboo to speak on politics or even religion, particularly early
Hmm.
on, and now if you get into the dating apps, there's people that are putting it on Front Street, literally on their profile, and there's people saying, "Hey,
Hmm.
if you vote left, hit left. If you vote right, hit right." And there's some
Hmm.
people who will literally tell you, "Hey, I'm liberal, or I'm very conservative, or I'm pro Trump or pro Biden or whatever." And it's
Yeah.
interesting how that's really become a thing. And I do think it is something very important that for something serious, right, you have to be on the same page and on the same wavelength, or it is going to be tough sledding, especially in today's environment.
Well, I was going to say that, the polarization of our country is so far, like as far as the East is from the West, is how the left is from the right here. It feels like now where you can't even discuss it without people, having real hate-filled lingo on both sides and, very clear lines drawn with if you're this, you can't be with me, or if you're that, I don't want to be with you. So, I know, especially with the younger Zs who are, beginning voters, some of them just voted for the first time. My two daughters are in that Z generation. I'm a Gen X. And they are very like, if you didn't vote, about women's rights and you don't feel like I should have a right to my body, or if you don't, they're very vocal about where they stand, and there's not a whole lot of gray for them. Um, and for me, that's a little bit concerning. It has been concerning for me in this country as I've watched these last few, and not to make this about politics per se, but how do you create relationship with others if you won't even have a conversation about your belief system? And while we do need to be compatible, I do believe that. I do think that's important to be able to be able to knit threads together to create something, beautiful and lasting. But do we have to have group think? And that's what I feel like we're getting to, where on either side of the aisle, there's so much group think that there is no more wiggle room for like seeing that maybe on this you have the better idea, on that I have the better idea. Now there are some things that I feel like we saw in this election that were very scary to me, moving forward in terms of individual rights and treatment of people who are different. I think we got to be careful with that because, that can just go wrong so many ways. And I always used to, in history, they used to say this quote, nobody oppresses like the oppressed. And so I feel like sometimes when people feel like they don't have rights or they've not had their voice heard, they tend to go all the way, you know, to the extreme with things. And that extremism has been very difficult to overcome. And I will say, in dating, the first time Trump was elected, I was talking to this guy um, who was Cuban and a Jew, and he was Jewish, and he was a Trump supporter. And I continued to date him because I was just like, I can't believe, it felt very surreal. I was just like, okay, here I am, a black woman. First of all, I was dating interracially. I was dating someone of a different faith. And then I was dating someone who had totally different political belief systems than I did. But we would have some really good intellectual conversation about politics and everything because it was so different. And I was just curious, like what would make you feel like that was the right way to vote? Like, why would you feel like that's the right person for you? Now, ultimately, we did not work out because we had so many differences that I just felt like there was no compatibility, um, that we could create a real life together or, stay in relationship together. But it was very interesting to at least hear his point of view. And there were a couple points that we did actually agree on, but when you get to the point where I don't even want to talk to you because you're not like me at all, I just, that kind of makes me cringe a little bit, just being who I am.
I will say this. I think we have lost our way in this country as far as being able to sit down and have grown up conversations without
Hmm.
having to belittle or
Right.
having to argue or having to attack people. And I feel like we talk to talk instead of talking to listen. And I
Yeah.
want to make myself very clear. I have dated conservative women before.
Hmm.
And there is a distinctive difference between people, particularly in my case, right, with women that I've dated that were conservative. I felt that with women that were conservative or identified as conservative as far as politically and beliefs, I feel that I could sit down and have real conversations with them,
Hmm.
and we could, have engaging dialogue about policy. Because at the end of the day, policy and laws and propositions and all that, we
Hmm.
can sit down and there's many different ways to discuss how we want to go about that. And I think that
Hmm.
it's important that we don't lose that ability to listen to different ideas, different perspectives, and not to be converted into sheeps and lambs where we all
Right.
sound alike and we all look alike, and we
Yes.
only hang out with people that look alike and sound alike. Because to
Hmm.
me, I feel that that is a dangerous path where it's going to create more division, more extreme behavior. And to me, I feel like it's more fun when you are able to get more perspective, different ideas, different experiences, surrounding
Hmm.
yourself with different people.
Absolutely. I'm with you on that 100%. It's just, and then I think too, now this was very interesting and maybe for you as well, both of us having, a POC, people of color background. With me being a black woman, I discovered there were a lot of black people who either, number one, did not believe in the system and didn't want to vote this time because they didn't feel like it was going to make a difference. Or two, there were quite a few who voted for, Donald Trump. And so that was quite interesting within my own racial dynamic to see the way people carried on. Like, everybody is different. And I know even for our Latina and Latino brothers and sisters, there was a lot of diversity in voting as well this time. And, people got hot. Like, people got angry with the results of the election and during the election and probably still after the election. Um, so it'll just be really interesting to see how it plays out in terms of family dynamic as well. I just remember the first time um, President Trump won, it just felt like so much division came up to the surface in the country. And so I'm really curious, research wise, like how how much did politics play a role in whether people stayed together or broke up, as far as couples. So you did some research on this one. This topic was yours. What sort of statistics or what sort of research did you find with this? I'm just really curious. This was someone that it really made my mind go,
Oh, I did some digging in. I will say this. So part of the conundrum with this situation, as far as politics, is that um, number one, there's already like a dating app that they're creating for conservatives
Mm,
because it has gotten that challenging, right? To whether you identify with liberal or conservative, it's become so challenging and so toxic and chaotic that people just don't feel that they can engulf a relationship based on those said beliefs. And I will tell you from my personal experience, I've dealt with two women that were very, very Trump loving supporters.
Mm-hmm.
And my experience was that, and my first experience, literally on the first date, like she was the one that brought it up. Like we had literally ordered food, and this was right around November of 2020. So this was when that election was being challenged and when all that craziness was going on about, he said he won, the people, the legislators and the legislators in the states, and everybody else said that no, he lost. Even other Republicans were saying he lost. So
Mm-hmm.
in that melee, she literally brought it up, and I'm like, wow, that's interesting. I've never had a political conversation within the first 5 minutes of a date.
Right. Most people are
And
trying to avoid it, right?
right, and to me that threw me off big time. But I'm like, hey, like if we're gonna put this on the table, let's do it. And we literally bumped heads all night throughout the date.
Mm-hmm.
And my reasoning is, like I mentioned earlier, right, with conservatives, particularly the women that I've dated before in the past, I feel like I could have real dialogue, real fruitful discussion. With the two Trump lady supporters that I spent time with, I noticed that even when I would bring substance and factual things, if it did not appease her, she refuted the factual stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like I explained to her, look, like I can't support that man ever because he shits on my culture all the time. He talks bad about my people, and he
Right.
puts targets on my community and on my people and on my family and on
Mm-hmm.
myself. So yeah, I can't support something like that. And again, this is not even about policy anymore. This is about
Yeah.
how do you sit down and have dialogue to make this country better, and how do we meet somewhere in the middle and compromise. Imagine that, like what we have to do
Right.
in relationships,
Like
finding ways
real
to
diplomacy, right?
compromise. And I feel like we've lost that. And
Mm-hmm.
once I see that, hey, even if I present you factual things or things of substance, and you just refuse to review it or refuse to see it because it doesn't fit the narrative or whatever you wanted it to be, then I'm like, then how are we ever gonna
Mm-hmm.
have real conversation if you're gonna argue if water is water and air is air? Like at that point, it
Yeah.
makes it very challenging to find middle ground when you don't even want to start with just basic, hey, this is fact, this is fictional. And one of my favorite sayings that I've heard is you are entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts.
Mm. That's kind of neat. I like that. It's worth pondering. But one of the things about that interaction that I find uh peculiar is that, like, and not just you, but people who engage like that. Like, if this is how you go about something that um is, to me, on a very macro level, like we're talking about large numbers of people, policy affecting the country. Like, how are we going to discuss things when things get tight around our deeper micro personal issues? You know what I'm saying? Like, how we want to raise our children, how we're going to pay our bills. Um, like, if we can't even have decent discourse on ideology, which is, to me, that's very abstract. It's on a it's on a different level, you know what I mean? And how are we going to do when we get down into the weeds if you can't talk about things without it being like an angry outburst, or just, again, looking at facts versus looking at opinions. You know, that's going to be very difficult to work and live with somebody and navigate a relationship. Now, again, if they're at that point. Now, then it's not to say that, even every Trump supporter is at that place of, like, some people really have like arguments to support their, why they voted. And it really had nothing to do with the political system as much as destroying the political system. And they felt like he was a good destroyer. So let's break the thing and rebuild it. And I'm like, I don't know if that's the way I would go. Cause like, some things get broken and, you may not be able to make anything new out of it. You just got to go with a whole different direction. But
Oh, breaking shit is easy. It's rebuilding and,
that people are
having
not
the
doing a great
patience
job.
to do a
Yeah.
foundation and do a job. That's hard. But breaking shit, hey, you bring a dynamite stick, you can blow stuff all you want.
All
But
to
building stuff from the
smithereens.
ground up, that's challenging. But
Right.
I want to say this, like some of the research that I did. So Newsweek did like a poll, and they
Mm-hmm.
said that between that 18 to 30 range, which is, considered young crowd or young women. They said
Mm-hmm.
that from 18 to 30, the majority of women that they polled considered themselves to lean liberal or progressive.
Mm-hmm.
And the majority of men within that age range leaned more conservative
Mm.
within that same age range. So what's happening
Wow.
is you have the majority of women that are leaning more liberal and progressive, and then you have the majority of young men that are now leaning more conservative and pro-Trump. So you don't have enough conservative women for conservative men, and you
Man.
don't have
Mm-hmm.
enough liberal men for liberal women. So this really causes a dynamic
Mm.
where the odds are that you are going to run. If you're a woman, you're likely to run into a conservative man and vice versa. If you are a man, you that's conservative, you're more likely to run into a liberal woman. So let's talk
Now, what
about
does that look like? Oh, my
right. Let's
goodness.
talk about how do you make this work? How do people
Mm-hmm.
make it work? And right now, it is the lowest that it's ever been in this country as far as the polls and the data. It is the lowest that it's ever been where you have Democrats and Republicans married together.
Mm-hmm.
So there's real stats out there. And like I mentioned, right, there's already a person that's taken the initiative of creating a dating app just for conservatives. It did not mention anything for liberals, but that just goes to show you that this is how much it's impacting society and dating apps, that they feel that, hey, we need to create an app just for our political beliefs while
Mm.
we go out and date. So to me, that is very alarming because, again, a lot of people say that it is good to associate yourself with people of different
Right.
views and different perspectives because,
Mm-hmm.
again, if we're all trying to be sheeps and lambs, we're
Yeah.
going to miss out on a lot of bright ideas, a lot of perspective. And some of the things that I found with some of the research is, for the people, for the few that are remaining married of opposite political views, they have set up some, there is some reasoning to this and to the
Mm-hmm.
madness. And one of the things that they do, some of these couples, is they set up boundaries
Right.
as far as how much they want to discuss and what they're willing to discuss. Also, another thing, it's important to understand the whys,
Mm-hmm.
because just because you're pro Trump, that doesn't mean that you hate all the other races in the world, right?
Right.
Uh, that's obviously
And I think that
something
is
that,
oversimplifying. Yeah.
and just like you're pro liberal, that doesn't mean that you don't believe in protection and you don't believe in, having
Mm-hmm.
safe borders and all that stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important, when if you do decide to pursue a person that has other political beliefs, it is very important to understand the whys and to understand, why do you feel this way or why do you see things this way. Because if we already from the jump start to jump down somebody's throats because of who they support or because of what their political beliefs are, you're already creating tension. And then when there's tension, it's going to be challenging to find that middle ground or to even meet halfway.
Absolutely. Totally agree with that. And again, I just come from a time and place when discourse was healthy, debate was healthy. Like you don't just argue and get all in your feelings, but you're really looking for common ground. You're looking for holes in arguments. It was very strategic, not just personal attack. And I feel like there's so much more personal attack and like you're just stupid if you believe that type talk. And it's very disrespectful on both sides because like people have a right to their opinion, they have a right to their feelings. And sometimes we need to find out like why people feel the way they feel. Even people that we don't necessarily completely agree with or agree with at all. I think that's where we build empathy, we build relationship, and being able to find a partner, whether it's the same sex or what have you. Um, like we gotta know a person, and nobody feels safe when they feel like who I am is going to be belittled or attacked or made to feel like what I think and believe is, you know, is is negated. Like I'm less than if I don't think like you. And so I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens and trends as far as marriage, how early or how late people get married, especially in that Z generation. Um, and dating pool already is dry sometimes, just the choices
You don't
based
say.
on
Real?
uh, for real. So, for people to be able to have to now go to like the political level and dive in, I maybe the app wouldn't be so bad, but again, it's like um I find anytime people try to um the only word I can come up with, and hopefully no, everybody knows what this word means, but whitewashing, like where you just remove all of the differences. That's what I mean when I use that term, to remove the differences from a particular group. So, Hitler tried to do that where, you want to create this superior race by getting rid of everything that's not like one particular one. And when you do that with any sort of ideology, it just becomes very dangerous in a society like that where America was you know um touted as the melting pot of the world for such a long time, and now to think that we're getting to a place where it's so polarized that we're now trying to think of ways to not even be with one another. Like I'm so disgusted with you and what you think. I don't even want to associate myself with you. And it's really sad. So, if you're out there dating right now and you're finding this political climate to be uh very damaging to your dating life, I too did a little research, Poppy, and went to a counseling site, lifeconnectionscounseling.com, and they talked about there were one or two things when people went to therapy because of political differences. There were a couple of things that you needed to think about, and one was, uh, should you even discuss politics, and can you do it without fighting, or do you steer clear completely of the debate? So it's almost like you have only these two choices, right? Uh, the first was about discussing politics without fighting. Look for the good in the other person's position. Stick to facts, not opinions. Be a willing and generous listener. Look at your differences as a way to expand your thinking and grow, like we've talked about. Pay attention. This one was very a highlighted one for me. Pay attention to your tone of voice and avoid angry outbursts. Like, don't get your emotions all into it. And then respect. This was also a highlight that there's a time to back down. Like, don't just keep arguing for the sake of arguing when you're not going to change the other person to your side. And so often I saw during the election that like people are just so willing to just argue. It's almost like everything has become this reality show world where we're all trying to look for a fight, you know? And I'm like, that is so exhausting to me after a while. So the other choice was steering away from political debates, period. But there was some, I like the way the article couched it. So, one, ask yourself what you hope to accomplish by having this conversation. Like, what is knowing somebody's political viewpoint gonna do as far as like, if you're sold out to the fact that I can't be with somebody in the red or somebody in the blue, and you're just trying to ferret out where they stand, then of course, that's what you're looking for. But if you want more than that, of course, then you got to think like, what am I hoping to get out of this? Two, remember that political foes attack each other for political gain, not because they hate each other. A lot of those folks are friends on Capitol Hill. They might argue with one another, in debate and are doing all sorts of stuff when it comes time for election. But a lot of those people still have a lot of commonality and are friends after it's all said and done. But then they've got us hating each other because of their rhetoric, and it's not even like how they feel about one another truly. Um, Rather than trying to prove points, ask questions, keep your political passions private, never debate issues online. And then the last one they use is ask yourself if any political ideas or positions are deal breakers for your relationships. So, Jamie Danielle Farrell, licensed marriage and family therapist, was the article's writer. And I just thought these were some real good points to think about, especially, the aftermath of this election. What is dating going to look like here at the holiday season, going to your parents? And two, this is another thing, Poppy. Like, what if I bring you to my parents and you say you voted for the wrong person when you get asked? Like, what is that going to do with the family,
Oh man, that could get messy. That could get
Fast.
very, very messy. But I will say this, right? I think it's important to establish that if it's just casual stuff or for fun, I don't really see the point of getting too deep into the political discussion if you're just kind of, looking for fun or casually dating. But
Mm-hmm.
if you are looking to build,
Mm-hmm.
if you are looking to grow into something long term or something meaningful, or if you
Mm-hmm.
are even considering having a child with this person, then absolutely those political, those religious beliefs, those moral conversations, they need to be had early on before things really get hot and heavy and serious, because
Mm-hmm.
obviously that is going to cause a lot of friction if you have polar opposite views about how you would want to raise a family, about how you want to go about, bringing up your kids, or whether they're going to go to church,
Mm-hmm.
or whether you're going to let them make their own decisions as a child, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, I do think that it's important to be mindful that now that politics is on Front Street, whether it be the news, the movies, the memes, the music, the
Mm-hmm.
sports, it's all around us, which is why
Everywhere.
it's also it's become so acceptable now, where even at my job, I've had people talk politics. And before Trump came into the picture, you rarely heard that.
Uh-uh.
I heard people making jokes about a wall at my job before, and I was like, wow, this is what we've gotten to.
Right. And that used to
And
be
I'm
very
like,
unprofessional and looked and frowned upon by HR. Like that's not something that was acceptable in a company, for people to do that.
oh,
So,
absolutely. That's why when that was happening, it was very eye opening to see that, wow, like we rarely deal with this at work, and it felt uncomfortable and weird. But this is where we are now, where it's become something where every day it's around us, and we can either get consumed by it, or we can try to adapt and try to find common ground. And I think, to me, common ground is going to be crucial to kind of get back to a stable way of being able to have dialogue, being able to coexist with each other, because one side's not going anywhere, the other side ain't going nowhere. So we got to figure this shit out on our own, and we got to learn to communicate, and we got to learn to coexist. And let's be honest,
yeah.
right? This country is going to progress by people being together and trying to succeed together. Because if only one sector of people succeed, this country is going to crumble.
That part.
Um, but I do think, right, that it is important that we do have those conversations early on, because you don't want to
Hmm.
get to a point where you're fighting like cats and dogs, because that's going to get ugly, man. That because
Yeah.
politics is it's gotten very vicious. It's gotten it's created a lot of division amongst families,
Hmm.
amongst friends, and obviously in relationships. So I do think that it is a conversation that needs to be had. But like you mentioned, right? Like we got to have those conversations with the idea of trying to listen, trying to understand. And me
That
personally,
part.
I never go into a political or a religious conversation with the intent of trying to change anyone's mind. Because at the end of the day,
Hmm.
when it comes to religion and politics, people are already set in their ways. People already have
Yep.
their heels dug in. So it's just a matter of, I'm going to give you my perspective and my why, and I want to hear your perspective and your why. And if we can do that and maybe find common ground, then okay, let's see where this goes. But if we do that and we can't find common ground, and if I
Hmm.
feel that I have to sacrifice my morals, my conviction, my beliefs to be with a person because of politics or religion, then that's not your person.
Right. And I think
Like,
that's the most important part of the whole conversation. Like, if you've got to fit yourself into someone else's box and they can't accept you with where you stand, and you don't feel free to talk about what you think and feel truly with the person, and them accept you, whether they agree with you or not, but they can accept you, then you're right. It's a deal breaker for me right there.
yeah, and you can maybe fake it for a little bit, but eventually that's just going to wear on you. That stuff's going to be a lot to keep bottled up. And you
Hmm.
don't, we've talked about different scenarios where you feel like you're walking around on eggshells. And that to me defeats the whole purpose of trying to find happiness and trying
Hmm.
to do life with somebody that you love. That to me is the complete opposite of that. So,
Yeah.
in essence, I think it's important that we still learn to engage and to have these conversations, but we have to have these conversations with the idea of listening and understanding whys, not to try to coerce people to change their mind, or not to try to trick people, or to blow smoke up people's ass with crazy lies and conspiracies. And listen, I don't mind talking a little conspiracy here and there, but everything can't be a damn conspiracy now.
Right.
like like whenever I hear people pulling up, with some of this, crazy conspiracy stuff, I'm like, okay, look, for outlandish conspiracies, I need outlandish proof. If you don't have
Yeah.
outlandish proof, we're just chopping it up and talking bullshit.
Right, exactly. So, but again, it's all about communication. We always come back to it every show. It never fails. But for this one, we're going to wrap up. And thank you for everybody. Poppy and I are looking at our fourth season, Poppy, coming up with the relationship cycle with Jorge and Nelsa. And we want to thank everyone who has helped keep us motivated to keep coming back with more. It's just like, the longer we're doing the show, it seems like um, the deeper the relationship cycles have grown. Like there's so much more to talk about. Just when you think we've maybe hit our best or brightest topic, there's more. And so we
Oh
just
man,
thank
it's
everybody for
I mean, just
participating in
just on
that.
this topic alone, there's so much to dig into, but we wanted to keep it, short, sweet, and concise. But at the end of the day, don't compromise your morals, don't compromise your beliefs. That's never going to end well with anybody, regardless of whether it's
Yeah,
politics, religion, or just personal principles, personal beliefs. That'll never end well, I promise you. But thanks everyone for your love and your support. As always, check us out on our YouTube channel and follow us at the Relationship Cycle with Jorge and Nelsa. We have a ton of content there, so please check us out. Give us likes, comments, and please share our podcast with anyone that you think may find this interesting or engaging. And as always,
absolutely.
buenas noches, good people.